Folks, we need to talk about Kim Kardashian. Don't press stop. Don't press stop. This has to do with climate change and protecting the ocean and protecting the planet. Kim Kardashian has released a new product. It's a bra that has a little function, I guess. And part of the proceeds will go to 1% for the planet. And that's important because we're starting to see influencers and celebrities talk about climate change. And we need to talk about why that's important and what you and I need to do as climate influencers to be able to talk more about climate change. That's on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, what you can do to speak up for the ocean, and how you can live for a better ocean by taking action. Today we're going to talk about speaking up for the ocean, and who is speaking up for the ocean may surprise you. When I first started getting into marine biology, way back when, 23 more years ago, in the late 90s when I started my undergraduate career and I started to really focus on what was happening with the environment, climate change was a hot topic, no pun intended. But not many people were talking about it. Celebrities weren't talking about it. People weren't talking about it. We weren't seeing a ton of things going on other than some bleaching here and there. And I say that as someone who wasn't really involved, but we had the 1998 bleaching event, which was huge around the world, but not many people were paying attention to it. Facebook wasn't invented. There's no social media at the time. The internet was still fairly new. And so we were still, kind of going on what was the mainstream media's narrative. We all know there's a narrative there. But climate change was not of top of mind. Researchers were talking about it. Academics were talking about it. Nonprofit organizations, non-governmental organizations, they were talking about it, but nobody was listening. And celebrities certainly weren't talking about it. We were worried about in the late 1990s, we were worried about, Y2K. What was going to happen when we hit the year 2000? Computers were supposed to be a mess. Stocks were supposed to dip, which they did. And the stock market and the tech boom was supposed to crash, which it did. And then we had the 2000s, and then things changed in 2006, 2004, 2005, 2006. We saw the implementation and introduction of social media, and sort of it really changed the way we consumed data. We consumed media. People who had the opportunity to break news themselves and talk about what was important to them. We started to see more and more people talk about the environment, the ocean, the air, the land, and then climate change started to peak around. Still, big companies and everything weren't talking about it. They didn't want to. Oil and gas companies, fossil fuel companies, they didn't want to because they knew that they were causing it, but they were still in denial. And the idea of whether climate change was real or not was happening. But people were talking about it. There was a debate about it quite a bit. And obviously, over the last 15 years, we saw the change. We saw the change happening, and more people, especially this year after this summer, are talking about climate change. So much so that we're starting to see celebrities really come out with climate change. The parody, I guess, of the movie on Netflix that was called Don't Look Up, which was a movie about scientists who discover an asteroid is coming to Earth, but nobody wants to believe it because they just want to be entertained and want to be happy, including a lot of political leaders. Well, we saw that movie and we saw how it ended. Obviously not something that you want to see happen, but it's kind of that was a take on society, a couple of years ago where we were still seeing denial. We were still saying, hey, we just want to be entertained. We just want to be happy. But more and more celebrities really started to come out. We started to see celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio come out and talk about climate change in his Oscar speech. We started to see celebrities demonstrate and participate in protests on the White House steps or the parliamentary steps or wherever. We started to see some activists and advocates, as young as 15 and 16 years old, from around the world start standing up for climate change. And now it's done, people. Well, you hit the mainstream when Kim Kardashian is talking about protecting the ocean and about the weather and about climate. And this is not a poking fun at her talking about it. I admire that she is putting together a charity part of her new product, which is a bra that has a little feature on it. I'm not going to talk about it. It just doesn't need to happen. It's kind of interesting and ridiculous at the same time, in my opinion, but whatever. It's her product. And her product is going to be donating 1% to 1% for the Planet, a charity that is, works with companies that want to be able to donate money to charities that have an environmental focus. And that, Kim Kardashian came out in a article in Vogue to talk about why she wanted to do that, why that was important to her. Now, you could probably criticize the product for probably not being very green or not made very green, but she's making an effort. She's talking about it. And just by her talking about it, we know influencers and celebrities who are influencers in their own right have an ability to change the way people think, right? The way their fans and behaviors of those fans change. And, just if you look at it, you can also look at a small celebrity, and I'm saying this sarcastically, by the name of Taylor Swift and her fan base, the Swifties. Just a recent example of the power of Taylor Swift and how she can change behavior, even in market behavior, consumer behavior. When she started dating the famous tight end in the NFL, Travis Kelce, one of the best tight ends of all time, arguably, will probably go down at the end of his career as one of the best tight ends in the NFL. I'm a big NFL fan. Admire Taylor Swift as well. And it changed his Travis Kelce's jersey sales once they found out that they were going out, that they were dating. His jersey sales went up 400%. The viewership and ticket sales went up as well for the NFL. Anytime they thought Taylor Swift was going to be there, the Swifties came out in droves. And, you could say if that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, but definitely changes the way there's behavior around a particular sport or a particular, jersey or what have you. And it was interesting because a celebrity, Olivia Wilde, came out shortly after that, it was a craze around the news. Everybody was talking about the fact what Taylor was doing for the NFL because she was showing up at games. The camera people were on it. All the innuendos and all the sort of, mysteries around the phrases that are used for titles in her songs were all used around the NFL. The NFL marketing department definitely, and the Kansas City Chiefs department definitely got on the backs of that and really started to take it all in and dive right into the fact that Taylor Swift was bringing the NFL to a whole different level with, her unbelievable fame and influence. And Olivia Wilde came out right after that and said, hey, wouldn't it be great if Taylor Swift was dating a climate scientist? And a lot of people didn't like her for that. You got to be careful when you talk about Taylor Swift's Swifties or Taylor Swift's boyfriends or anything that has to do with Taylor Swift and maybe doing something sarcastic. Not that she meant anything bad about Taylor, but I think the commentary that she explains was the fact that it's unbelievable the influence that this woman has. Deservedly so in terms of what she's been able to do and how she's been able to make people feel. But this woman has a huge influence. And just imagine if she has that ability to take one of the biggest sporting markets in the world and putting it on a different level, like accelerating that influence and accelerating that power. Imagine what she could do if she put that towards, climate change and the awareness around climate change. And her fan base, how much they love and just go, like they buy everything she wears. If she wears this particular outfit, they go out and they buy it, these Swifties, right? And they live off every word that she says. They analyze everything that she does. Imagine if she started to come out and talk about climate change. I'm not saying she believes in climate change or doesn't believe in climate change or she's interested or she's worried about it. I don't know. I have no idea. I've never met the woman. I've never had a conversation with the woman. However, just imagine what she could do to her fan base, the millions upon millions and millions and millions of Swifties that are out there, to be able to just say, hey, we need to do something about climate change and put programs together. Again, I don't know if she has programs out there, but the comment that Olivia Wilde said was actually kind of true. Just imagine that a lot of these influencers and a lot of these celebrities have that ability to be able to change behavior in donations, in support of policy, in support of particular areas of climate change if those celebrities started to talk about climate change. Now, that could tank their reputation. You never know. But I feel like Taylor Swift is she's got a little bit of like that Teflon look, right? What do they call it? The Teflon Don, where nothing really sticks to them. And so I don't think she'd get a lot of friction when it comes to speaking out against particular subject matters. I know she's talked about politics in the past in some of her documentaries, and imagine if she talked about climate change a little bit more. And again, I don't know if she has or hasn't. I haven't seen it. I just don't know if she has or hasn't. But that was the comment that Olivia Watson. So people in Hollywood, people in the influencer market like Kim Kardashian and others are talking about climate change. And there are climate change influencers or climate influencers where these are social media personalities who have dedicated their time to put together, content, whether it be in the form of video, a blog, if so in a text form, an audio form, and they're talking about various, climate change resources, various climate change positive stories, and negative stories that go along with it, policies that people should be, supporting or think that they should be supporting or should know about. And there are influencers out there. And there's this really great article. It's called climatecommunications.earth. I'm going to put the link in there. And one of the contents of it is climate influencers, influencing the influencers. And so they have a number of different articles or sort of, perspectives of different climate influencers and how they go about doing their work and what have we seen from where they come from. And there's videos on it. It's a really great resource, and this is just one part of a major white paper of different articles that can help with what they do, right? And so it's really, really great. I'm going to link to it. I want you to take a look at it and peruse it. I've read a little bit of the articles, but here's like one of the article or one of the clips, I guess, from a influencer called I think it's David Fenton. David Fenton. He says, recruit celebrities, influencers, and cultural figures. They attract attention and have large followings. Recruit athletes, actors, rock stars, CEOs, and YouTube and Instagram influencers to promote your message. Think Lady Gaga on LGBTQ plus rights, Leonardo DiCaprio on climate, and John Legend on criminal justice reform. This is a quote from David Fenton. So just imagine, like, if we go out and recruit. Now, I've talked about, and I've done recruiting through this podcast to tell people, to tell you guys, to tell the audience here that listen, to tune in, which I love the fact that you tune in, to say, hey, it's time that we start to be the influencers. It's time that we influence. And you don't have to have a big influence. We've seen people with big influences talk, and that's great. But what sponsors and what people are really looking for, they're looking for people who are relatable to them, right? Audience members are looking for people who are relatable. And in these articles that I'm going to kind of go through quickly are ways that that people are actually trying to go ahead and to, like, the strategies they're using to get to people, right? So for instance, there's Joel Bach, who's the executive director of the Years Project. And so what he's basically created is he's created the network. And so the initiative, the network, has 155 members and a combined social media reach of over 500 million people. Each week, they disseminate the most pressing climate messages, tweets, videos, and other posts to the network. So its members can then share that information with their followers. So just a resource that they can provide that would just be like, hey, here's all the major news that's happening around climate change. Here's it from tweets. Here are the trending topics. Here are the videos, other types of posts, climate messages, whatever that might be. It's all in one form, so you can go ahead and talk about it. And it looks like, from what it's the picture here, it's just different materials, and it looks like it's in text format. So it could be like a newsletter, what it looks like. And so it says it's great. It says the strategy has been widely successful, with the vast majority of our members opening the email, so it's email newsletter, and reviewing the content each week, and an equally large percentage sharing that they see that see on their social channels, on what they see on their social channels. So our goal is to double the size of the network each year and create a distribution machine at low cost. We'll be able to reach billions of people with actions, messages, and content to save our struggling planet. We will also use their powerful tool to continually reinforce our central message. That is not the job of the individual to stop the climate crisis. Rather, it is the job of companies, institutions, and governments. The job of the individual is to remind companies, institutions, and governments of this fact. So this is a really great thing. And they said they just to make the communications goal a reality, they recently partnered with Academy Award-winning director and producer Adam McKay, whose credits include Don't Look Up and Succession. And they said once we merge his list of influencers with ours, we will be even better positioned to amplify our work and his. So what they're doing is they're like, hey, who do you know? And do you have a connection to other influencers or just people in general? And then what they're saying is this: we have this community of people who are interested in learning about climate science and learning about climate change and what they can do. And so you get this newsletter, they pass it around, it builds and builds and builds. It's almost like when businesses go and they buy email lists to add to their email newsletter, and then the newsletter gets out to them. And sometimes, when you get an email and you don't realize how you got it, okay, well, that's not a good practice. It's actually illegal. But in this case, what they're doing is they're having people who have large email lists put out free information all about climate change. Right? And I assume people have the option of opting in and opting out, which is always great because that's the legal part of it. Now, here's another creator that I've actually been following on TikTok for quite some time and Instagram, Sam Bentley, who's a sustainability content creator, and he's all about good news, planet Earth. So he says he's a social media content creator, advocate for sustainability and positive change, who's been working in social media for over a decade at the forefront of social video. So very short and long form video. He creates videos that showcase good news and solutions that are moving us towards a more sustainable future. So what he tries to be is as relatable as possible. He does not speak in the jargon that scientists and conservationists use. He speaks in what is pretty much what people like his audience will relate to, what they feel most comfortable with, right? He says, although his content reaches a wide range of demographics, there are a couple of key demographics where he notices that they're particularly engaged with. The first of those is people in the education space, whether it's teacher looking for easy to understand resources to share in their classroom, parents looking for hopeful stories to share with their children, or students looking for guidance or topics to introduce in their studies. The second is those new to sustainability but eager to learn more. His content may be people's first point of contact with sustainability issues, and my intention with it is to be much needed stepping stone for viewers to dive deeper into the topic that resonates with them. So he says his climate approach is particularly effective because he prioritizes digestible, relatable content, both contextually and visually. He says he's a perfectionist when it comes to designing social videos, prioritizing video clips that will best tell the story, hooking the watcher within the first 5 minutes. So he's giving out, his tips and his strategies on how he shares his content and what he does. And to be honest, it doesn't look too difficult when you go on there. It's easy to digest. It is relatable. He uses easy terms. He gets like hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of views on his TikTok viewers, on his TikTok videos. And I think it's just really great to see what he's sharing and what he's doing. Now, there are other stories that are on here as a case study. Climate stripes on the pitch. So there's a English football club, Reading FC, that made headlines in January 2023 after using climate stripes on their sleeves during the Premier League game. So what they did is they had specific stripes. If it was red, it was hotter, and if it was blue, it was cooler. And it was designed by University of Reading's Professor Ed Hawkins. Each stripe represents annual average temperatures from 1850 until 2022. Shades of blue indicate cooler than average temperatures, while red stripes stand for hotter than average years. The design was explained by the game's lead commentator to an audience of more than 2 million people in the first half of the game and was retweeted by professionals around the world. So just being in a spotlight of an English Premier League match, right, for football, and just saying, this is what these stripes are all about, and explaining it to an audience of 2 million, and then that getting tweeted out. Because when people are watching the game and they hear that kind of stuff, like, that's pretty interesting. It's kind of a cool thing to do. It's not in your face. It's not, saying you did something wrong. All it's saying is saying, hey, the blue lines are cooler than average temperatures. The red lines are warmer than average temperatures. We need to do something about climate change, and people will tweet about it. It's a positive message. It's something that's really interesting, and I really love it. There's another person, Isaiah Hernandez. He's an environmental educator and creator, and queer brown vegan is what he goes by. Now, he says climate influencers have a problem. So eco-influencers or climate influencers represent a niche within a creator economy of various activist communities, focusing primarily on communications work. Much like his work with Queer Brown Vegan, they use a mix of video, photo, or illustrations to drive their message in organizations, albeit with a social or ecological foundation. Many climate influencers have created organizations and are running their platforms based on their existing work or careers, including youth climate activists. Much of the eco-influencer landscape is communication work that orients around awareness, which is a precursor to action. Which stands to stark contrast of social media at large, which is designed to maximize screen time. So many influencers, himself included, share and promote product ads due to a need for more funding models to sustain their work. For himself, advertising or promotional agreements support his work, funding his team, and support his family. The role of an eco-influencer has changed from one individual telling you about the more sustainable products to varying layers of entrepreneurship, storytelling, and thought leadership. The majority of his work focuses on working with academic institutions to communicate climate science, implementing climate education programs at museums across the states, and creating curriculum-based environmental justice courses with nonprofits. However, this work is typically behind the scenes and not publicized. So there's 2 points of this: is a business that's created behind the scenes, but based on the fame and the followings and the advertising revenue and sponsorship revenue that happens with climate changes, right? But there are powerful imbalances. He mentions there are powerful imbalances on how online activism is now valued higher than offline activism. Grassroots organizers and organizations have highly relevant data and case studies showcasing how injustices were fought and what was demanded. Social media commonly limits the visibility of those stories and solutions, especially with a bias towards short-form content. This is why those who continue to practice local grassroots activism must also be elevated to share the real-world examples and work being done on campaigns and create change. So what he's saying here, what Isaiah is saying here, is the fact that the algorithms do not promote the sharing of information on specific projects, showcasing the injustices. All it does is it's more about screen time and what's entertaining to people. And sometimes these stories are hard to digest and need to be changed. So it's a really, really interesting thing. He also has a video in terms of the problem with climate influencers, talking about how you get your funding, where you get your funding from. There are not a lot of businesses that will fund this message because it's not as if it's profitable. This is a non-profitable kind of message. It's very similar to me when I do my podcasting, trying to find a business model that works and working with sponsors to come on here and be like, hey, I would like to be supported doing this. I would like to do a lot more with this platform if I was able to do it full time. I can do a lot more if I was able to do it full time. Trying to find a business model that works towards getting funding and getting sponsorships from companies who are sustainable and things like that is very difficult because those companies are not necessarily sponsors or used to sponsoring. There are a lot of companies that I've spoken to who are startups or smaller businesses who are doing some great things in the sustainability world that are new to sponsorships for podcasts. And it's a lot of education, a lot of relationship building, which I don't mind doing. I really enjoy doing, but it's very difficult to build a business around it and just trying to get that income when other influencers are getting sponsorships, quite a bit of sponsorships from different companies that may or may not be sustainable. So this is a great resource. I'm going to link to it in the show notes. I think it's really interesting. It also talks about how Coldplay helped protect the Amazon rainforest, and it's all different things. Next up, there's all hands on deck. There's just a bunch of things that I have just examples of people who are working to change and influence climate change basically how Patagonia helped protect one of Europe's last wild rivers, what's next for the climate change movement. There's a lot of good things that are happening here. I highly recommend that you check it out because it's something that I think is really important. That's it for today's episode. I know it was a little longer than normal. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think as yourself, as an ocean influencer, as a climate influencer. Do you want to be one of those influencers? Do you find that influencers are a bad name? I know a lot of people hate the word influencers and don't want to be referred to as influencers. More entrepreneurs that just have a social media message, which is exactly what an influencer is, but you're trying to change the behavior of somebody, right? Based on your messages that you're putting together. In this case, we're trying to change for climate. We're trying to change for a better planet, for a better ocean, for a better land. And we're having a good message around it. And there's nothing wrong with being known as an ocean influencer or a climate influencer if you're putting together and you're doing things right. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can hit me up on my social media platform of choice. That's on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. Feel free to DM me. I'd love to hear your thoughts about influencers in the climate world, good, the bad, the ugly. I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear about your plans to become an influencer in your own right. You don't have to have a huge following. In fact, just one last thing. In fact, what a lot of people are saying is that sponsors for influencers are looking at smaller influencers and being able to fund a number of more smaller influencers than trying to do one influencer and taking all that money, putting on one influencer that has a huge following, plus millions, or million plus, and not, or 100,000 plus, and not being able to have that message land and taking a risk on one when they can pay for many using the same amount of money and, have a lot of just a diverse audience. So, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a big audience to be a climate influencer. You just have to talk about climate. You just have to talk about the ocean. You talk about environment and protecting the environment, and you can all of a sudden become an influencer and help with the movement. So love to hear your thoughts on that. How to Protect the Ocean on Instagram. You can go to my website, speakupforblue.com /podcast. That's speakupforblue.com /podcast to find all the other episodes that we've ever done. Over 1,526. That's what this episode is. 1,526 episodes. Love to hear from you, what you think about the podcast and about this influencer stuff. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.